Welcome to English Podcast. Today we will listen to how to learn English quickly in just 2 minutes a day. Part 1. Identity First Principle in the world of personal growth. One of the most powerful ideas to emerge in recent years is the Identity First Principle. At its core, this principle flips the traditional model of behavior change on its head. Instead of focusing on what you need to do to reach your goals, it suggests you should begin by focusing on who you need to become. Your actions, habits, and decisions are all downstream from your identity. This foundational shift in thinking can create a ripple effect that transforms not just your behavior, but the entire way you relate to yourself and your goals. To understand this more clearly, let's consider a familiar example. Suppose someone wants to get fit. The typical approach would be to create a workout plan, buy new running shoes, subscribe to a fitness app, and maybe join a gym. This is the action-first model. But what happens when motivation fades, or life gets busy? More often than not, those plans fall apart. The reason? The identity underneath the actions never changed. You can force yourself to go to the gym for a few weeks, but if deep down you still see yourself as someone who struggles with fitness or doesn't enjoy exercise, your actions will eventually realign with that identity. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of saying, "I need to go to the gym," the person starts telling themselves, "I am someone who takes care of their body." That subtle shift is everything. It creates a new identity that naturally generates the desired behavior. When you believe you are someone who cares for their health, going to the gym is no longer a task, it's a reflection of who you are. You don't have to fight against yourself to follow through. Your actions become congruent with your self-image. This is what the Identity First Principle is all about. Creating lasting behavior change by starting with the kind of person you want to become. When identity leads, behavior follows. And when your actions are aligned with your identity, consistency becomes effortless. The change is no longer a struggle, it becomes a part of your life narrative. But how exactly do you adopt a new identity? The brain, as it turns out, has two critical requirements before it can accept a new version of you. The first is clear visualization. The second is obstacle planning. Together, these form a technique known as mental contrasting, and they play a crucial role in making identity transformation stick. Clear visualization means you can vividly picture yourself as the person you want to become. If your goal is to be a reader, don't just imagine holding a book. See yourself absorbed in the story, excited about ideas, discussing what you read with friends. Visualization taps into the brain's sensory and emotional systems, which helps imprint this new version of you more deeply. It's not just a fantasy. Your brain begins to see this vision as a possibility. However, visualization alone is not enough. This is where most people stop and fail. They imagine the best-case scenario but ignore the inevitable friction. That's why obstacle planning is essential. Obstacle planning asks, what could get in the way? What will try to stop you? What will make this hard? By mentally rehearsing the setbacks you're likely to face, you prepare your brain to respond effectively instead of reacting emotionally. This realistic layer makes the identity more grounded and attainable. However, visualization alone is not enough. This is where most people stop and fail. They imagine the best-case scenario but ignore the inevitable friction. That's why obstacle planning is essential. Obstacle planning asks, what could get in the way? What will try to stop you? What will make this hard? By mentally rehearsing the setbacks you're likely to face, you prepare your brain to respond effectively instead of reacting emotionally. This realistic layer makes the identity more grounded and attainable. Mental contrasting, then, is the act of seeing both the positive vision and the potential obstacles. This contrast doesn't demotivate you, it strengthens your resolve. It helps your brain map a clear path from your current identity to the one you're trying to build. And when that path is visible, your mind is far more likely to stay committed. But even with the best intentions, visualization, and planning, there's still one more ingredient needed to lock in a new identity: action. Not just any action, what we call minimum viable progress. Minimum viable progress, MVP, is about creating microproof that your new identity is real. These are tiny, manageable actions that serve as signals to your brain that change is happening. If you want to become a writer, write one sentence. If you want to become a runner, jog for 1 minute. If you want to become someone who meditates, sit quietly for just 30 seconds. These actions may seem too small to matter, but they're actually rewiring your brain's self-perception. You see, your brain keeps score. It's always looking for evidence of who you are. When you perform even the tiniest action in alignment with your desired identity, your brain updates its internal map, Oh, we did a push-up today. Maybe we are someone who works out. Repetition is the key. The more consistently you perform these identity-confirming actions, the stronger the belief becomes. Over time, the brain's resistance fades, and a new sense of self takes root. Importantly, minimum viable progress also bypasses one of the biggest blockers to change, the fear of failure. Big goals often feel intimidating, but one push-up? That's not scary. One paragraph? Totally doable. MVP removes the friction and lowers the threshold to action. You're not trying to overhaul your entire life overnight. You're simply sending a small, clear signal. This is who I'm becoming. When you combine identity-driven behavior with mental contrasting and minimum viable progress, you create a powerful system for transformation. It's not reliant on motivation, which is fleeting. It doesn't demand massive willpower, which is finite. Instead, it works with your brain's natural tendencies, its need for clarity, preparation, and proof. This system is especially powerful because it integrates the psychological, emotional, and behavioral layers of change. You're not just doing different things, you're becoming a different person. And the brain, once it believes something about you, fights hard to remain consistent. That's why identity-based change is the most sustainable form of personal growth. Another important insight is that this kind of identity shift doesn't need to be dramatic. You don't need to become someone completely new overnight. In fact, the best transformations are incremental. You start by nudging your identity in a new direction. You show up for 2 minutes. You do something small, again and again. And slowly but surely, your brain updates its self-image. Before you know it, you're not pretending to be a healthy person, you are one. You're not trying to be disciplined, you just are. In a world obsessed with hacks and quick wins, the identity-first principle offers something deeper and more lasting. It invites you to become the kind of person for whom success is not an effort, but a natural outcome. It's not about doing more, it's about being more. And from that being, all meaningful action flows. Ultimately, identity shapes destiny. Who you believe you are will determine what you do, and what you become. So if there's one place to start your journey of change, let it be here, not with your to-do list, but with your self-image. Upgrade that, and everything else will follow. Part 2. Environment design in the journey of personal transformation. Few elements are as consistently underestimated, and yet as powerful, as your environment. While most people focus on willpower or motivation, the truth is this: your surroundings often shape your behavior more than your intentions do. Your environment silently nudges your choices, influences your mood, and determines whether your good intentions become habits or fade away. If you're serious about changing your life, you must start by redesigning the spaces you live in. Let's begin with a powerful strategy called temptation bundling. It's simple but brilliant. Pair something you need to do with something you love to do. Want to build a workout habit? Only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. Need to do deep work on a long-delayed project? Only let yourself enjoy your favorite coffee or sit in your favorite cafe when you're working on it. This technique leverages your existing desires to help you build new disciplines, creating a positive feedback loop between pleasure and productivity. Over time, your brain begins to associate effort with enjoyment, making it easier to stick with hard tasks. But beyond pairing tasks, real change often requires a complete redesign of your environment. Here's the rule: make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. If you want to play the guitar more often, don't keep it in a closet. Place it right in the center of your living room, where it's impossible to ignore. If you want to eat healthier, put a bowl of fresh fruit on the kitchen counter, and hide the snacks in the back of the pantry. Want to write more? Leave your journal or laptop open on your desk. These aren't just decoration tips, they are behavioral cues. Your environment can either reinforce your identity or sabotage it. And here's something that might surprise you: every major action, no matter how big, has a 2-minute version. This is a concept drawn from habit expert James Clear, but it applies far beyond productivity. It's a psychological doorway into sustained behavior change. Want to write a novel? Start with just 2 minutes of free writing. Want to run a marathon someday? Just put on your shoes and jog for 2 minutes. Want to meditate? Sit still and breathe for 2 minutes. These short bursts are not about results. They're about identity reinforcement. Every small action is a vote for the person you want to become. This 2-minute rule serves as a momentum builder. You're removing the friction that keeps you stuck and replacing it with something so simple that your brain has no excuse not to comply. And once you begin, it's almost always easier to keep going. That's the hidden power of starting small. It bypasses resistance and activates your inner inertia. Newton's law of motion applies to personal growth too. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. But let's go deeper. What most people don't realize is that environment doesn't just include your physical space, it also includes your digital space, your social space, and your emotional space. If your phone is cluttered with distractions, your focus will be fractured. If the people around you constantly tempt you to break your promises to yourself, you'll be fighting an uphill battle. If your workspace is disorganized, your mind will mirror that chaos. So what can you do? Curate your environment. Design it with intention. Audit your space for hidden friction. Are your tools accessible? Is your goal visible? Are your distractions invisible? Take control of these details because they are not neutral, they are shaping your future. Want to practice a new language every day? Put sticky notes on your mirror. Want to drink more water? Keep a full bottle on your desk. Want to stop wasting time on social media? Remove the apps from your home screen and replace them with a reading app or a journaling prompt. Make every square inch of your environment work for your goals, not against them. And here's a deeper truth. When you build an environment that supports the kind of person you want to become, you don't need motivation. You don't even need reminders. The environment itself becomes the system that drives your behavior. You wake up and automatically reach for the journal on your nightstand. You walk into your kitchen and see fruit instead of chips. You sit down and the guitar is right there, silently asking to be played. This is what makes environment design so powerful. It works invisibly, in the background, without needing your constant attention. It removes the reliance on discipline and replaces it with default settings. You no longer have to force the right behavior. You fall into it because the path of least resistance has changed. So if you're serious about transforming your habits and reaching your goals, don't start by asking yourself what to do. Start by asking yourself where to do it, and what's already in that space. Then, go to work not just on yourself, but on the environment that shapes you. Because in the end, we rise or fall to the level of the systems around us. Your environment is not just where you live, it's what you become. Part 3. Psychological leverage in the pursuit of personal growth and habit formation. One of the most underestimated yet powerful forces lies not in what we want, but in what we fear losing. This is the foundation of psychological leverage. Human behavior isn't just driven by goals and dreams. It's often dictated by how our brains respond to potential loss. Research in behavioral economics and neuroscience has shown that the brain is wired to avoid losses more intensely than it is to pursue gains. This phenomenon, known as loss aversion, explains why we often hold on to bad investments, stay in unfulfilling jobs, or avoid risks, even when we know the payoff might be worth it. The pain of losing something, money, status, time, is neurologically more intense than the joy of gaining something new. This loss aversion bias can actually be turned into an asset if we know how to use it. One of the most practical applications of this principle is to put money on the line. When you put down a financial deposit toward a personal goal, your brain suddenly raises the stakes. Not reaching your goal doesn't just mean you missed out, it now also means you've lost something tangible. And your brain hates that. Whether it's placing a bet with a friend, using an app that penalizes failure, or paying up front for a course you have to attend, this simple act of financial commitment radically increases your emotional investment in following through. You've created a psychological trigger, failure now equals loss, and your brain will work harder to avoid it. But money isn't the only form of leverage available to us. The brain also has another curious quirk that can be used for behavior change: its obsession with unfinished business. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik. She discovered that tasks we begin but don't finish create a kind of mental tension. Our brains don't like open loops, they itch to close them. This explains why you might remember the cliffhanger of a show more than the episodes that were neatly resolved, or why an incomplete to-do list nags at you all day. The good news is, you can use this tension to your advantage. By intentionally creating open loops, starting a task but not finishing it, you generate internal pressure to return to it. For instance, if you begin writing a report and stop midway through a sentence, your brain keeps processing it in the background. That mental friction becomes fuel to finish. This technique isn't about procrastination, it's about using the brain's desire for closure as leverage. The next time you feel resistance to starting something big, don't aim to complete it, just begin. Open the file, write the title, outline the first idea, then step away. That slight feeling of incompleteness? It will pull you back in. Now, let's talk about another key psychological tool, commitment devices. These are self-imposed systems or external constraints that make it harder to back out than to follow through. Think of them as guardrails that keep you on track. For example, telling your friends or family about your goal creates social pressure. You've publicly committed, and now your reputation is on the line. Pre-scheduling your workouts or coaching sessions removes the need to decide each day. You've already committed. Paying for something in advance, like booking a writing retreat or joining a workshop, means walking away would be a waste, so you're more likely to show up. These commitment devices work not because you're more disciplined, but because they restructure your environment in a way that forces discipline. They make failure feel heavier and success more accessible. You've shifted the cost-benefit equation. Instead of needing motivation every day, you've built a system that pulls you forward, even when your energy dips. It's a subtle psychological shift that changes everything. Together, these strategies form the foundation of psychological leverage. By turning your brain's biases into advantages, you create an environment where success isn't just possible, it becomes the path of least resistance. You're no longer relying on willpower or motivation alone. Instead, you're aligning your actions with how the brain naturally operates. You reduce friction. You create accountability. You generate internal momentum. This is especially powerful because change is rarely about one grand decision. It's the accumulation of small choices, made consistently, over time. And those small choices are governed by the systems and mental triggers around you. When the brain is emotionally invested, when it fears losing money, when it needs to close open loops, when it wants to save face, it shows up differently. It focuses. It perseveres. It takes ownership. Let's walk through a simple example. Say you want to write a book. Normally, you just set a goal, make a plan, and try to stay motivated. But using psychological leverage, you would do 3 things. Put down a deposit. Maybe you hire an editor or pay to reserve a writing cabin in advance. Now you're financially committed. Create an open loop. Start writing your introduction, but deliberately stop after the first paragraph. Your brain will want to finish it. Build commitment devices. Tell your friends you'll send them the first chapter by next Friday. Schedule a writing session on your calendar, and treat it like an unmissable appointment. Each of these steps makes giving up more painful than continuing. That's the core of psychological leverage, not making the goal more appealing, but making quitting less tolerable. This shift rewires your brain's relationship with the process. You're not just hoping you'll follow through, you've made it more difficult not to. There's something incredibly empowering about working with your psychology rather than against it. Too many people rely on brute force, willpower, hustle, and pushing through resistance. But the truth is, our willpower is limited. It fluctuates daily. Instead, by understanding the hidden mechanics of motivation and behavior, we can build systems that carry us forward even when our internal drive fades. The real secret to change isn't trying harder. It's creating better leverage. Make failure cost you something. Make quitting uncomfortable. Make starting irresistible. Make continuing automatic. And most importantly, make the stakes real. This is not just a productivity hack. It's a lifestyle strategy. It allows you to take full ownership of your goals and build a structure that supports them, day in, day out. You stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect mindset. You create the momentum and let the psychology do the rest. In the end, the most powerful leverage is the one that comes from within, from a brain that's emotionally and psychologically invested in seeing something through. You don't need to be superhuman to stay consistent. You just need to design the conditions that make consistency easier than giving up. So, whether you're building a business, learning a new skill, transforming your health, or writing your first book, remember this: the brain is not just your tool, it's your partner. When you learn how to speak its language, you no longer fight against yourself. You create alignment. You create drive. You create change. Part 4. Habit engineering. Habit formation is not about forcing yourself to do something new through sheer willpower. It's about designing a system that naturally leads you to success without friction, stress, or constant internal negotiation. This is the essence of habit engineering, the art and science of building lasting habits by anchoring them into existing structures, reducing resistance, and aligning your actions with your identity. Every new habit needs a strong foundation. That foundation comes from your current habits, the things you already do automatically every day. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. You need to strategically insert new behaviors into your existing routines. This is where the power of habit stacking comes in. By attaching a new habit to a behavior you already do without thinking, you take advantage of your brain's love for patterns and sequences. Instead of creating an entirely new routine, you simply extend an old one. For example, if you always make coffee in the morning, that action can become the anchor for a new habit like journaling, reading, or planning your day. Over time, your brain learns to associate the new behavior with the existing one, and the sequence becomes automatic. This simple act of piggybacking a habit onto something familiar eliminates the need for motivation or decision-making. It's not just about getting something done, it's about installing a pattern that becomes second nature. But not all habits are created equal. Some habits open the door to a cascade of other positive behaviors. These are known as gateway habits, foundational behaviors that, once established, make it easier to adopt additional good habits. Getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, waking up early, and planning your day are all examples of gateway habits. They have a disproportionate effect on your overall life because they shift your identity, energy, and mindset in a positive direction. When you complete a gateway habit, you're far more likely to eat better, think more clearly, and take proactive steps throughout the day. Instead of trying to juggle 10 different habits, focus on installing one gateway habit that can ripple through every area of your life. That single point of leverage can transform your mindset and make growth feel natural, not forced. Once you've chosen the right habit to focus on, the next step is to remove every possible source of friction. The reason most people fail to follow through on their intentions is not because they're lazy, but because the habit they're trying to build is too inconvenient. If your fruit is buried in the fridge behind a box of leftover pizza, you'll grab the pizza. But if the fruit is pre-cut, placed in a bowl, and sitting front and center, you'll naturally reach for it. That's how powerful environment design is. When something is easy to start, you're more likely to do it. When something is hard to start, you'll avoid it. The smallest obstacles, a closed drawer, a messy room, a dead pen, can kill a habit before it begins. That's why habit engineering requires you to reduce friction for the behaviors you want and increase friction for the ones you don't. Want to work out more? Lay out your clothes the night before. Want to scroll less? Delete the app or log out after each use. Want to read more? Place your book on your pillow so it's the first thing you see at night. These small tweaks compound over time and create a system that silently nudges you toward the life you want. But even the most perfectly designed habit won't stick if it relies on willpower. The truth is that discipline isn't a reliable strategy. It fluctuates based on stress, sleep, mood, and dozens of other variables. You need habits that run without thinking, behaviors that are so small, so easy, and so seamlessly integrated into your day that they don't feel like a task. This is where the 2-minute rule becomes essential. Every habit should have a 2-minute version. That means scaling the habit down so that it takes less than 2 minutes to begin. Instead of saying you'll read for 30 minutes, commit to reading just one paragraph. Instead of planning to run 3 miles, just put on your running shoes. Instead of writing a full journal entry, simply write one sentence. The 2-minute rule works because it removes the friction of starting. It helps you beat the inertia of inaction. Once you begin, momentum often takes over and you keep going. But even if you stop after 2 minutes, you've still won. Why? Because you showed up. You cast a vote for the identity you want to build. You're reinforcing the belief that you're the kind of person who follows through. That identity shift is at the core of habit engineering. Because in the end, habits aren't just about what you do. They're about who you become. Every time you follow through on a habit, even in the smallest way, you reinforce a message to your brain. You say, I am a reader. I am an athlete. I am a mindful person. These repeated identity signals are more powerful than motivation or discipline. They change how you see yourself, and when your identity changes, your actions follow effortlessly. This is why the most powerful habits are not just consistent, they are aligned with your desired identity. If you see yourself as a healthy person, you'll naturally choose foods that support your energy. If you identify as a learner, you'll naturally seek out books, podcasts, and conversations that expand your mind. The key is to make your habits serve your identity, and let your identity pull your habits into place. Over time, this creates a flywheel effect. Your small actions reinforce a stronger identity, and that identity reinforces more powerful actions. The system feeds itself. You no longer need to push yourself uphill. The momentum works in your favor. This is the essence of a habit ecosystem, a set of interconnected behaviors that support one another and create lasting transformation. You wake up early, so you have time to exercise. After exercising, your mood improves, so you make healthier food choices. After eating well, you feel more focused, so you plan your day. After planning, you reduce stress and increase productivity. After being productive, you sleep better. and then it all begins again. Each habit supports the next. The system becomes self-sustaining. You don't have to hustle to maintain it. You simply live it. That's the goal of habit engineering. Not to become perfect overnight. Not to cram 20 new behaviors into your schedule, but to design a simple, elegant system that makes the right choice the easy choice. That system begins with awareness, knowing what triggers your behaviors, what supports them, and what sabotages them. Then comes design, structuring your environment, choosing the right anchor habits, and simplifying the start. Finally, it becomes identity, shaping your view of yourself through repeated action. When you master these 3 pillars, change becomes inevitable. You don't need to force it anymore. The system does the work for you. So the next time you want to change your life, don't ask yourself what goal you should chase. Ask yourself what system you can build. Because in the long run, systems beat goals, design beats discipline, and identity beats willpower. With the right structure, habits become effortless. And when your habits change, your entire life transforms quietly, consistently, and permanently from the inside out. Part 5. Motivation Mastery. If you've ever felt like you've lost motivation, it's not because you lack ambition. It's because your brain can't see any clear evidence that you're making progress. Motivation doesn't come from vague visions of a distant future. It doesn't show up just because you have a big goal like buying a house, losing weight, or changing your life. Motivation comes from a sense of progress, from feeling that you're actually moving forward towards something meaningful. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings among people trying to change. They believe they need motivation to start, when in reality, you need to start in order to generate motivation. When your brain perceives progress, it responds by releasing dopamine, a neurotransmitter that fuels excitement, focus, and satisfaction. But if it doesn't see results, or doesn't realize that you're moving, motivation quietly dies. That's why mastering motivation isn't about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about designing a system that constantly shows your brain that something is happening. It's the art of managing your dopamine. One of the most powerful strategies for sustaining motivation is dopamine scheduling, intentionally planning small, achievable steps that trigger dopamine release at regular intervals. Instead of waiting until the end to reward yourself, you break the journey down into visible milestones, each offering a clear signal to your brain. We're doing this. For example, if you're writing a book, don't wait until you've finished 200 pages to feel accomplished. Celebrate each chapter completed, each writing session showed up for. This doesn't just keep motivation alive, it creates a bond with the process, not just the outcome. Each time you hit a progress marker, no matter how small, your brain is rewarded. This makes you more excited, more focused, and more likely to keep going, not because you're forcing yourself, but because you want to. It's just like a well-designed video game. Every task you complete gives you a small dopamine hit that makes you eager to tackle the next challenge. You're not relying on brute discipline, you're working with your biology. To make this work, you need to track your progress in a way that your brain can see. You don't need a fancy system, just a notebook, a habit tracker, or a simple app to check off each completed action. When your brain can see accumulation, the number of days you've worked out, the pages you've read, the times you've shown up, it feels like it's getting closer to the reward. And that fuels motivation. What matters most is the feeling of momentum, not necessarily the raw numbers. Someone who loses 0.1 kilogram per week but sees a downward trend on a graph will be more consistent than someone who loses 2 kilograms without any visible tracking. Our behavior is driven by emotion, not logic. And one of the most motivating emotions we can create is the sense that we're getting somewhere. Beyond progress and rewards, there's another crucial element in mastering motivation: connecting with your future self. This isn't a philosophical idea, it's a powerful psychological strategy with real-world impact. Studies have shown that people often view their future self as a stranger. That's why we procrastinate, eat poorly, slack off, or overspend, because the consequences happen to that person, not to me right now. But when you close the gap between your present and future selves, you start to feel a deep responsibility toward yourself. One of the simplest ways to do this is to write a letter from your future self to your current self. Imagine you've succeeded, you've made it through the hard parts, kept your promises, and changed your life. That version of you is now writing back, not to criticize you, but to remind you why you started. I know there will be days when you're tired, when you doubt, when you want to quit. But don't. Every day you persist, you're getting closer to me, and I'm living the life you deserve. These words aren't just mental tricks. They're a bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. They make that future version real, someone you can feel, relate to, and take care of. And when motivation fades, reading that letter can reignite your drive, not because someone else told you to keep going, but because you did. True motivation isn't explosive. It doesn't show up like fireworks. It burns like a steady flame, warming your spirit through cold seasons. To keep that flame alive, you need to refuel it through visible progress, smart rewards, a connection to your future self, and a constant reminder of your why. Anyone can feel excited on day 1, but only those who understand how to maintain motivation can still be standing on day 30, day 100, day 365. When you build motivation into a system, something that's created, sustained, and renewed, you no longer rely on emotion or inspiration. You control the source of your inner power. Motivation mastery is the ability to keep moving even when you don't feel like it. And to reach that point, you must stop romanticizing big, breakthrough moments. Instead, fall in love with the daily process. Learn to celebrate effort, not just results. Train your brain to recognize that every small action is evidence of progress, of identity change, of success in motion. You must also have a mechanism that regularly tells your brain, look, we're doing it. Whether it's a habit tracker, a progress bar, or a personal journal, this is the feedback loop your brain craves. Without it, progress feels invisible. But with it, every small win fuels the next. And perhaps most importantly, you must keep the line of communication open with your future self. Revisit the letter. Visualize who you want to become. Remind yourself that every action today is a vote for the person you're building tomorrow. The more you feel connected to your future, the more motivated you'll be to act in the present. Mastering motivation is not a coincidence, it's a skill, a strategy, a process, one that anyone can learn if they're willing to practice daily. So next time you feel like your motivation is gone, ask yourself, have I seen my own progress today? Have I celebrated my effort? Have I spoken to my future self? If the answer is no, don't wait for motivation to return. Create it. Step into motion, track the progress, and give your brain a reason to believe, we're getting closer. And the beautiful truth is, once your brain believes that, it won't need pushing, it will pull you forward. Because progress isn't just a feeling, it's fuel. Part 6. Cognitive tools in today's world. The human brain is overwhelmed. We're juggling dozens of tasks, switching between conversations, apps, and deadlines, all while trying to plan the future, remember the past, and manage the chaos of the present. It's no wonder so many people feel scattered, stressed, and creatively stuck. The modern mind is being stretched to its limits, and what used to be a tool of brilliance is now being used as a glorified to-do list manager, stuffed with random information, unclosed loops, and mental clutter. But here's the truth most people never stop to consider. Your brain was never meant to hold everything. It was meant to think, not to store. This is where the concept of cognitive tools becomes a game changer. At the center of this shift is an idea called the second brain. Think of it as an external storage system for your thoughts, ideas, goals, worries, notes, tasks, anything that normally clutters your internal mental space. By creating a reliable, accessible system outside of your head, you free up your cognitive load. You make space for real thinking, for creativity, for deep problem solving. Instead of using your brain to remember, you start using it to reflect, to synthesize, to create. The first and most important principle of building a second brain is this: write everything down. Don't try to hold it all in your head. The moment you write something down, whether it's a task, an idea, a worry, or a fleeting inspiration, you signal to your brain that it no longer needs to obsess over that piece of information. This simple act can radically lower your anxiety and increase your cognitive clarity. Why? Because one of the brain's defense mechanisms is constantly trying to protect you from forgetting important things. This is why you wake up at 3 a.m., suddenly remembering a call you forgot to return. Your mind is constantly looping, checking, and rechecking to make sure you don't drop the ball. But if you give your brain a trusted external system, somewhere safe to store what matters, it stops obsessing. It can relax. And when the mind relaxes, it can finally think clearly. This is not just about productivity, it's about reclaiming your mental energy. When you reduce the weight of remembering, you increase your capacity to think. You become more present, more focused, and more powerful in how you show up to your work and your life. You begin to operate from a place of calm control rather than frantic reaction. And it all starts with the simple discipline of offloading your brain. A key technique within this philosophy is something called the clarity pause. The clarity pause is an intentional moment where you stop everything and write down everything on your mind. Tasks, thoughts, concerns, open loops, emotional frustrations, everything. You don't organize, judge, or filter. You just pour your mental content onto the page or screen. What this does is create a clearing. It externalizes the internal chaos so you can finally see it. Most of the time, stress doesn't come from the work itself, it comes from not being clear on what the work is. The clarity pause allows you to turn vague tension into specific, manageable information. And once something is clear, it becomes actionable. Clarity is powerful. Most people walk through life buried under mental fog, unsure why they feel so drained. They try to think harder or push through the burnout. But the real problem isn't a lack of motivation, it's cognitive overload. When your mind is trying to track 100 unfinished thoughts at once, it becomes nearly impossible to focus or feel confident. But when you externalize those thoughts, when you write them down, you reduce the noise. You lower the internal static. You regain clarity. This is where the second brain truly begins to shine. Once you've captured your thoughts and tasks, you need a system to store, organize, and retrieve them when needed. This is not a fancy app or a complicated process. It's about building a place you trust, a notebook, a digital tool like Notion, Evernote, or Obsidian, somewhere you can regularly visit to reflect, plan, and refine your ideas. The goal is not just storage, but connection. A second brain is not just a vault. It's a living, evolving system that grows with your thinking. Imagine how much more mental energy you'd have if you didn't have to remember everything. Imagine showing up to your day with a clear plan, not because you woke up inspired, but because you already did the thinking in advance. Imagine being able to find any important idea, note, or project detail in seconds, instead of digging through messy inboxes and notebooks. That's the power of the second brain. It gives you a new level of control, a new level of freedom. But let's go even deeper. When you consistently offload your thoughts and build clarity into your system, your brain begins to operate differently. You start noticing patterns in your thinking. You begin to make better decisions, faster. You develop a sharper intuition because your mind is no longer cluttered. You start solving problems more creatively because you've given your brain the space it needs to wander, to make unexpected connections, to play. This is not magic. It's neuroscience. Your brain thrives in clear, organized environments. When your external world is structured, your internal world follows suit. There's another hidden benefit to using cognitive tools: emotional regulation. Most people don't realize how much their mental clutter contributes to anxiety, indecision, and procrastination. When you keep everything in your head, your brain treats it all as urgent. It doesn't know the difference between a major life decision and a reminder to buy toothpaste. Everything screams for your attention. But when you get things out of your head and into a system, you give yourself the power to prioritize. You begin to separate the urgent from the important. You create distance from your thoughts, which gives you the emotional leverage to choose your response, instead of being controlled by mental noise. And this is where the deeper magic happens. As you begin to use these tools consistently, you're not just managing information, you're shaping your identity. You become someone who thinks clearly, who makes decisions with confidence, who creates instead of reacts. Your external system becomes a reflection of your internal discipline. And with each use, you reinforce the belief, I am someone who is in control of their mind. This kind of transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires practice. It requires experimentation. But the return on investment is massive. With every idea captured, every loop closed, every system refined, you reclaim more of your mental power. You create the space for deep focus, meaningful work, and strategic thinking. One of the biggest lies in modern life is that success comes from doing more. The truth is, success comes from thinking better. And you can't think better if your brain is drowning in disorganized tasks, random inputs, and mental clutter. That's why building a second brain isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for anyone serious about high performance, creative work, or long-term growth. Let's bring this full circle. The greatest thinkers, writers, inventors, and leaders in history all used some form of external thinking tool. Da Vinci filled notebooks. Einstein sketched on scraps of paper. Writers have journals. CEOs have dashboards. This is not a new idea. What's new is that the digital age gives us more powerful tools than ever to build systems that work seamlessly across devices, contexts, and timelines. But even with the best technology, the principle remains simple. Get it out of your head and into a trusted system. Write it down. Revisit it regularly. Reflect, refine, and evolve your thinking. Let your external brain become your creative ally, your strategic partner, your mental sanctuary. Because when your internal world is clear, your external world becomes easier to navigate. You make better decisions. You feel more grounded. You create more value. You operate from a place of strength, not stress. In the end, cognitive tools are not just about productivity hacks or note-taking systems. They are about reclaiming your mind, about honoring your potential, about giving yourself the clarity and structure you need to operate at your best, day after day.